Hi everybody, this is Amy here to talk about the nervous system today. We've spent a lot of time the last week talking about how action potentials are transmitted along a nerve membrane as well as a muscle cell membrane. But today we need to talk a little bit more about the organization of the nervous system as a whole. So I want to start right here with the breakdown between the central and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system specifically is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system is made up of all of the nerves, both the spinal nerves and the cranial nerves that extend to and from the central nervous system. So if we take a look at this section here in yellow, let's look at how this is broken down. So within the body, these nerves are carrying information towards the brain and spinal cord as well as away. Remember, we have sensory input coming in. We have motor output going out to the actual muscles and the glands in the body, and then the central nervous system becomes that integrating center that receives the information, decides what needs to happen, and then sends the instructions out. So it's really within this peripheral nervous system where we have a lot of variation or breakout in terms of very specific functions. So if we start with this sensory division, remember, sensory information is going up towards the central nervous system. So we can have sensory information coming from two different parts of the body. We can have it coming from the somatic sensory division, which includes the skeletal muscles, the joints and the tendons and the skin, all of the things that we think about in terms of being consciously aware of. So sensory information coming from the areas of our body that we're consciously aware of make up the somatic sensory division. The visceral sensory division is going to take care of sensory input coming from the parts of our body that we're not consciously aware of, so all of our internal organs. So you combine the somatic and the visceral sensory, and all of that information gets brought up to the central nervous system. Now, once that information comes in, that's when the brain has to take on that role of integration and then deciding what needs to happen and sending instructions out. Remember, the instructions go out to muscles or to glands. So those are really going to be the effectors that we're dealing with. So motor information is going out towards these muscles or glands, and we begin to create functional branches here as well. We can send motor output to the somatic motor effectors, and this is going to be towards the skeletal muscles. This is going to be what's voluntary, the voluntary effectors. The autonomic motor division, on the other hand, goes to our involuntary effectors. And if we think about what those would be, we said that the effectors are muscles and glands. So the muscles of the autonomic would be everything that's involuntary, so cardiac muscle and smooth muscle. It would also go towards the glands because we're not consciously in control of what our glands are secreting either. Now, this autonomic division can branch further into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic division. The sympathetic division is that fight or flight, and the parasympathetic is rest or digest. Really, this is a balance in our body. A lot of these organs, these involuntary organs, are going to be innervated by both sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers. So if you think about the balance there, what happens is that the parasympathetic fibers are here to basically keep our activities normal, and the sympathetic fibers or the sympathetic input is here to ramp up activity as necessary to help us deal with some type of a stress. That stress could be just actual stress, and we talk about that some in this chapter. It could be something like exercise, which would be physical stress to the body. And then the one that we think about the most often would be the stress that occurs in an emergency situation. So in that situation, what are all the different things that the body needs to kick in to high gear to make sure that we can actually be prepared to physically deal with this? So the sympathetic division takes on things like dilating the pupils to get more light in, opening up the bronchioles to increase air to the lungs, increasing heart rate, increasing blood pressure to help us deliver oxygen properly to our bodies. And the sympathetic division also does things like turn off some of the non-necessary functions. Like we don't have to worry about digesting our food when we're trying to run for our life. Those are going to be things that we can shut down for a time. So the sympathetic is actually going to always take over. It's always going to trump whatever the parasympathetic would do. You can't have both working at the same time, so the sympathetic division is always going to win in that situation. All right, we're going to keep going again in a few minutes about some more nervous system functions.